Hello and welcome again to season 2, episode 2 of Inside America's Minds. Today I have Leni Rivera. Leni, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, Jody, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be part of this. So I appreciate your invitation.
You know what? It's a privilege for me and our audience. And I know we're going to learn a lot from you. And I'm so excited to have you. So, Leni, Workplace Experience Specialist.
Yes.
Really, I have a lot of questions for you. You're also an author, a speaker, a thought leader. You have been featured in numerous TV guest appearances on NBC, Fox News. You've been cited in Forbes magazine and other multiple podcasts and radio shows across the country. And you've written a lot of articles that we're going to get to as well. So your passion is about creating workplace experiences. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, awesome. Thanks for asking. And yeah, it's been quite a journey, I'll tell you. And really, because I'm on your show, and I know that you understand this, I think more than anybody else, the one passion that I do have is enhancing people's lives. There was a Gallup poll that came out in 2017, and it said that 85% of the worldwide workforce were unhappy. In America, 70%. That's huge. Oh my gosh. 70% of Americans were unhappy, disengaged, fully disengaged, hated their jobs, but they came into work anyway. And the kind of, I mean, you would know this better than anybody else, the kind of what that does to a human being, you know, and how what that does to you as a person, who you become for your families, for your community it's huge. And I can't live in a world where this is okay. And I've seen a lot of workplace bullying. I've seen a lot of that. And even in the general community, you know, if I get to live one life and I get to choose one thing to do, and, you know, while I'm on this earth, I want to try to make things better for people. And the one thing that the toolkit that I have, that experience has given me is everything in the workplace. And my experience is everything in the workplace, from interior design to facility management to safety and security to food services, to everything that you name it. It's creating an environment that can help enable people to thrive. So that's why I'm really passionate about workplace experience. It's why I have been for quite some time. And what workplace experience is, if you loosely define it, it really is what it says. It is the experience that one has in the place in which they work. And that can be a lot of things. Normally, when you talk about the experience of an employee, people, even companies, generally think about it from the HR perspective. What kind of policies are in place? What kind of things are in place to help, you know, training and to help promotions and feedback, that kind of thing. When I talk about workplace experience, it's the physical environment. So it's, do you have the support that you need if you are physically disabled, for example, or differently enabled? If you have mental health concerns, do you have what you need? Do you have lower lighting? Do you have screen things? Do you have areas that you can go and just, you know, take a break and have a comfort area? Do you have, even if you are not within those categories, is it a place where you feel included, that it is inclusive and that it is equitable? Do you have the right lighting? I mean, even basic things, the right lighting, the right equipment in front of you, ergonomic chairs. And I think about this even when you work from home. If the job of a company is to make sure that you are productive and you are engaged, how can you do that if you've been working this entire last 2 years off of your sofa or off of a dining room table or on your bedroom?
Good point. Good point. And that's a question that came to my mind, is especially with the pandemic, have you seen changes in the workforce and employees? Because a large amount of our United States population is the workforce.
Yes.
So therefore, when you say that, what was it, 70 or 75% Americans are not happy with their work environment, that's big. And then you throw the pandemic into it. So talk to us a little bit about that, how the pandemic has changed things. And I'm sure everything I've read about you, even coming out of Forbes, there is a big demand for you and your expertise. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it was interesting because, like I said, I had been passionate about workplace experience. I wrote my book even before the pandemic. But at that time, nobody was really hearing it or listening to it. They focused more on employee experience and the workplace. What the pandemic did is, of everything within a work environment, what it got rid of is the workplace. What it shifted is the workplace. Because traditionally, ever since the Industrial Revolution, so that's how many centuries ago, companies were always centralized. The structure of organizations were centralized, meaning that employees were centralized into an office, into a corporate area. So management systems and the structure of organizations, I will watch you, you will watch them, you will watch them. That whole hierarchy came from that environment. Now, cut to centuries later, here we are, digital revolution has come, changed the ways in which we've lived, but still, organizations didn't want to let go of this structure that they've been relying on for all these hundreds of years.
Wow, kind of like the infrastructure of marriage too. I mean,
yeah,
just
don't even get me started
there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
no,
it hasn't. The infrastructure of the workplace has not accommodated the change, including the digital world. I found out recently, I was doing this continuing ed, they kept referring to digital immigrant. I'm like, what is a digital immigrant? Well, it turns out it's somebody like me who wasn't born or raised in the digital era. Right? So most of us who were born before a certain year, but anyhow, go on.
Right. No, that's right. That's exactly right. And if you think about companies, a lot of the company leaders are our age or digital immigrants. They're unused. They're not used to this kind of thing. Whereas a lot of the workforce, I think it's something like 50% of workforces now are millennials and Gen Z. They have the existence with the digital experience.
Yeah.
So what happened during the pandemic then is, when all of a sudden everything was forced to be decentralized, employees were forced to work outside of their companies. Now, I need to put this into context. I'm only referring to office-based industries. We'll get to the other industries later, but office-based industries became decentralized, or employees were working away from the offices. What was surprising to me, but surprising to everybody else too, was that they were even surprised that it was actually going to work. A lot of companies were afraid that they were going to fold because, oh no, what are we going to do? Our structure is now changed. But really, technology has been in place all these years to enable this.
Good point.
Always been around, enable. That's why it was seamless. It was seamless. We all worked from home. Okay, snap on the computer, snap on the phone, and we were meeting. Companies continued to work and continued to thrive. Many of them even thrived better during the pandemic. So technology has been around. It has been around to enable it. All of a sudden, it's here. That's why when we're talking about the future of work and going forward, I know that a lot of companies are wanting to have people come back into the office. Even employees, they're done with being stuck at home and they want to come back into the office. But what's going to happen is, and I talk about this a lot when I talk about my work in terms of what the future of work is going to look like.
Yeah.
If you think about the structure of organizations, now mind you, a structure defines the relationships within organizations. So the hierarchies, right? The way things were organized, because I watch this, I watch this, I watch this. This is the workforce. So that whole structure of management has been in place the same way. Now it's decentralized. Now everything is changing. But what we have to understand is, for hundreds of years, the pendulum was on one side, where all the workers were coming into the office, working the office. And then in a matter of days, because of the pandemic, we shifted completely to the other side. And everybody was working from home 100% of the time. Now, as the pandemic restrictions are starting to lift, that pendulum is going to drop and it's going to swing back and forth, because there are people who've been stuck at home and are dying to get back into the office. So no, I want to come back. I want to come back. But after a while, we're going to start to realize that, you know what, there were things that I really missed about being, the autonomy of being at home, the autonomy over my work, and the time that I get to work, and the kind of things that I can do on my other side of my life, my personal life, while I'm at home. All of these things are going to become more and more apparent. And then that pendulum is going to swing back and forth before we finally find an equilibrium to what the future work actually looks like. So that's—
How long do you think that might take?
I honestly, a couple years.
Okay.
3-5 years.
So I want to quote you on your website. My goal is to create workplaces that allow all employees to thrive from anywhere. So from home or in the workplace, I'm assuming.
Yes, that is correct. And all employees is key, because the thing I think, when the thing about one of the wonderful, not wonder, I shouldn't say wonderful, because I need to always remember that the pandemic was not wonderful for most people. But one of the silver linings of the pandemic and what that's done to companies is, because people were working from anywhere, companies have been able to hire from anywhere. Workforces today have never been more diverse. And when we look into the future, more companies that are hiring from anywhere are creating work environments and workforces that are incredibly diverse. And what that does is phenomenal, for companies, for organizations, for people. But what that also means is, now more than ever, companies need to focus on an equitable, inclusive environment that is a place where everyone feels that they belong, whether you are a different gender or race or preference or ability or cognitive ability or any of those factors. You need to feel that you still belong, because if you don't, then companies are going to start crumbling as you're becoming more and more diverse.
I'm making a note here because you just triggered a question for me. So, and we need to let the audience know that you've been doing this over 20 years and across 3 continents. And tell us a little bit about your experience before we go on, so people understand that you have beyond earned the right to be one of the most innovative individuals with regards to moving forward in the workplace. Tell us a little bit about you, Leni.
Okay, well, the one thread that I have, and I think where I connect with you the most too, is that I've always been interested in human behavior. But everybody in the workplace industry, this industry that I'm fighting to become an industry, which is workplace experience, is really new. Hasn't even really been a part of company conversations till around 2016, around that time. So it's relatively new. So people who come into the workplace and are workplace people have all come from different backgrounds: real estate, facility management, interior design. There's no one straight path. The path that I came through this is, I was first a professional actor. So I studied my first degree. I studied professional acting at NYU. I graduated with a degree in acting.
I saw you graduated from NYU. Okay.
Yeah, and I was a professional actor then for 10 years. Now, because I am taking my master's in organizational psychology now.
And I was just going to say, you are such an organizational psychologist.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. The difference, when I talk about acting, the difference between acting and psychology, because they're similar. But with psychology, as you know, when you understand human behavior, you study it, you understand human behavior from a point of view where you're looking at it from a distance. So you can see it, analyze it, observe it, diagnose it, help it, encourage it, whatever. But you're looking at it from the outside. It's important that you see it from outside of you. When you're trained as a professional actor, and the work of acting is you're trained to understand behavior either through observations, through the script, through all of that. And not only understand behavior, take it on, understand it in such a deep way that you take it on and live it as if it's your own. So that's why, that does explain a lot of the reasons why many of us actors are a little bit crazy, because that is part of what we love to do. It's part of what I love to do. And I
think it's creative. Yeah.
It is definitely creative. And it forces you to think of how people live in a perspective outside of your own.
Well, and as an actor, I would assume that you put yourself in their role as well, as best as you can.
That's exactly right. Because you can only draw from your own experience. What could that possibly be like? But it is a very empathetic way of approaching work, I guess, because you have to take it on and live it as your own. You can't judge it. You just have to live it. But that was acting. So I did that for 10 years. And then that industry was a little bit tough. It's a very look-based industry, and I wasn't in it for that. I was really in it because I loved the craft. So then I shifted careers and I took interior design, and I specialized in residential design. And what I loved about that is you have to understand the behavior and the cultures and customs of families or of a person, and you develop an environment that supports that, enables that, and celebrates that. So that was a wonderful way to shift into what human behavior, understanding it from that perspective. And I really only practiced with my own practice for about a year. Then I was hired by a company in Dubai to set up their interior design company in Abu Dhabi. And that interior design company specialized in residential design for Emiratis.
So tell us what the Emiratis are.
Yeah, so the Emiratis are the local people from the UAE. So Dubai is a part of the United Arab Emirates, and if you are a national, United Arab Emirate national, they're called Emiratis.
Okay.
Okay. So Abu Dhabi is the capital of the UAE, and it is has the 70% of the people living there are Emiratis, unlike Dubai, where the vast majority are people from other countries. So Abu Dhabi is really, because it's the capital, it had the most Emiratis and the most number of Emiratis living there.
How did you get recruited to go there?
I know. It was funny enough, I was hired by a few other people, and it was like a call of like hundreds of us, and there were 8 of us called back, and I thought I was going to be hired as one of the designers of the 8 designers, but when I arrived, the leaders, they called me and they said, no, we want you to open the branch that we were wanting to do in Abu Dhabi. So okay. So,
wow. And how was that for you as a woman? Because we hear a lot of things about women in power overseas, especially in the Middle East. How was that? Correct the stereotype I have going through my head.
Okay, well, you have to understand it from their perspective. So if you look at the way women are treated from the Western world, from the American world, it looks odd. It could look like, oh, you're putting me down. But if you look at it from their perspective and from the cultural perspective, it actually isn't. You're being elevated. I'll give you an example. In a bank, for example, or any establishment, a government establishment, or any establishment, there's always a separate line for women. So there's all these other lines that you can go in for the general public, and there's a separate line for women. In train cars, in buses, there's a separate segment for women. Now, from our perspective in America, it can look like, oh my gosh, that's what they did back in the day, the racial concerns, right? That's how they did it in the 60s. And it wasn't segregating. What it was doing, it was protecting them from the perspective of that culture, and I benefited from that as well.
Okay.
You have a lot of people, and there are a lot of men from different cultures. When you're sitting with women, you feel safer. The fact that it's giving women a privilege of. Another example that I had is I remember I was sitting I was waiting for friends that were inside the grocery stores. I was sitting outside on a bench. It was quite a large bench, 6-footer bench, and I was sitting on one end. Well, a gentleman had come and sat on the other end. Okay, I have no problem. At one point, one of the mall security guards came over, whispered in his ear, just politely, and then he left, because they didn't want another man to be sitting with me so that I would feel safe.
Oh, I never knew that.
From that perspective, it's from the perspective of keeping women safe, safe from the general public, or safe from male interactions, or here you get that all the time. When I was living in the Philippines, you're with men and you can get pinched in the butt, or you can get these derogatory statements, or that accidental, oh, I happened to touch you, but you get these things. So you get
I'm laughing because I grew up in Italy, and it was a similar thing. The wolf whistle, now I'm sure it's changed, but well, at least I could say I hope it's changed. But okay. Right. So how long were you in Abu Dhabi and Dubai?
For 4.5 years.
Okay, and then you come back.
So I was in interior design first. I was setting that up, and I was again, you have to it was in order to create an interior design company, and be successful that was for residential, you had to understand the culture of the people, so that because you're building an environment for that. So that's why I can speak about, I understand, you know, the behavior and the customs. I can't say I'm an expert for sure, and there's a lot of things I don't know, but I did it to the best that I could, taking it from their perspective so that I could design for that. And then because I was doing so well, I opened the branch in Qatar. My business model was put in 2 branches in Dubai. So then the company was a holding company. So then the company said, okay, we want to take you. And they moved me to head their real estate development company. So my life has been a little bit colorful and serendipitous like this. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So then I was the general manager of a real estate development company. So again, now my understanding of human behavior was first from the personal level in acting, and then it was in a family unit, right? And what that's like. And now with real estate development, it's the social behavior of how you are with your community. One of my developments was a community of 79 5-story buildings with 3 community areas and landscaping and gated areas. And so it was understanding what is their social behavior, what are they like, within the greater community, so you can provide services that are relevant to them. So it was the understanding of behavior from a larger and larger perspective, which I really valued, because then after that, I moved to the Philippines and was hired to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why the Philippines?
So I'm half Filipino and half American. My American side is from New York, and where I was during college, and yeah, mostly during college and that. And then the Filipino side of me, and my dad is Filipino, and so I also was raised in the Philippines. So when I left Dubai, I moved to the Philippines, and I joined it's the largest pharmaceutical company in the Philippines. So it had a lot of clients, had a lot of it had a lot of money.
As you're telling me this, I'm like, the difference in cultures is so phenomenal. I mean, the integration and acculturation. How was that, going from the Middle East to the Philippines? How was it the same? How was it different? And how did it contribute to where you are today?
Okay, that's awesome. It's a great question. I'll take it from the context of being back in America today. And I moved back in America 3.5 years ago. And now I'm in the West Coast. So my family's still on the East Coast, but I'm on the West Coast. But what I love about being back in America is you are free to be who you are. You are free to bring in your whole self, regardless of your backgrounds or your religions or that. The similarity between the UAE and the Philippines, and maybe other cultures as well, but I can't speak for those other cultures. Maybe you can relate from Italy, I don't know, is when a culture, a country is ruled, a lot of its customs, traditions is ruled by religion. That then sets the forefront. That becomes the forefront of the way customs are built and the way culture is built. So the Philippines is very Roman Catholic, and it's conservative from that perspective. It is still one of only 2 countries in the world that doesn't recognize divorce. The second country is the Vatican. So of course, there's always good and bad when it comes to any kind of culture, really, that is very specific. The wonderful things about that is you learn so much. It enriches your life, because you're really taking on a culture and a custom, and you understand where it's coming from, and it leads through everything, through the food, the behavior, the traditions. It's wonderful. But for me, who's really more American, and I'm much more liberal in my thought process and everything, it's tough to marry it after a while. That's why I'm glad to be here. But I don't mean to take that away from the richness of environments that are like that. But that's a similarity that they had, that, working. So when I went to the Philippines, it was, again, yes, I am half Filipino. So it was trying to understand, but I'm also half American. So it was trying to understand the Filipino aspect, because the company that I was working for is a Filipino company for Filipinos, run by Filipinos, and its target market are Filipinos. So it was really wonderful, again, like my experience in the UAE, to understand what the Filipino cultures and traditions are, so that I can create an environment to celebrate that. So I took on, that was when I understood what I love to do, which is workplace experience. And it was a huge environment. We had 8 multi-level buildings, and it was a Gold LEED certified building. So it was a beautiful environment. And when I started, I had 5 departments. By the time I left, I had 13 groups, business groups, because I could see if I put in something, the effect and impact it had on people. And by the end, when I left, there were events every month, there were exhibits, there was food everywhere. I mean, that's the thing. If you know any Filipino, that when you get invited to their home, they will feed you. Food is a huge part of our traditions, customs. And so in the Philippines, we had 80 conference rooms. I had a full functioning kitchen. Every meeting that we had, every meeting, small, big, doesn't matter, there was food. So you can imagine the production of that whole production of feeding and managing the conference rooms and cleaning it up and all that kind of thing. But when you understand the customs, you put in experiences that elevate it and celebrate it, and the festivity and the singing and the dancing and the colors and the things that that make that Filipinos become alive with. That's what you put into the workplace. And by the time I left, I saw the impact that a workplace experience had on workers. People loved to come to work. They enjoyed their jobs. We had an organizational climate survey. Everybody they attributed their engagement to the work environment. We had marketing groups who used to take clients out to hotels and entertain them in hotels. Now they were bringing them inside because they wanted them to show off, the environment, their workplace environment. That saved the company a lot of money. Even the corporate leaders spent a lot of time in the company and in that environment. I saw what it did, and that's when I was like, this is what I want to do. This is where everything is coming together.
So here in the United States now, what would you say about the work environment in America?
If I'm being honest, Jody.
Yes.
So I came back, right? And I think this is also what spurred me to take organizational psychology too, is if I'm being honest, I have never experienced the kind of hostility that I have in corporate America. And I lived in the Middle East and I lived in the Philippines.
Okay.
And even there, the kind of hostility was not the same. The kind of hostility that humans are to other humans here in America, in corporate America, and mind you, my experience is limited. I've only been back here for 3.5 years. But even in conversations I've had with colleagues, with peers and all of that, I'm just astounded. And now that I'm in school, I read study after study after study of the kind of hostility in corporate America and the psychopathology that goes on, right? It's
well, and that is one of the things that prompted me. I've got to get in touch with Leni to see if she'll be on the show, because a lot of my patients are young, successful individuals that work in corporate America, and the level of depression, anxiety, this imposter syndrome, which I'd like to ask you to talk to us about that. When did it change? Why did it get this way? Why does it have to be so bad?
And that's what I'm studying, right? And these are the answers that I'm coming with my studies, and from what I'm trying to understand is, I think looking at it from a larger perspective, a lot of it has to do with the structure of companies and the way things are structured. If you think about it, back in the time of the Industrial Revolution, you had desk after desk after desk of workers typing, right? And you had 1 or 2 managers managing a certain area. And their job was to walk around, looking over your shoulder. What are you doing? What are you doing? Making sure you're working.
Okay.
That was how they measured productivity, is to watch you and make sure you're working. And then on top of all of these managers, you have another manager, making sure that all of them are watching their people. It was a very micromanageable kind of environment. And the big bosses, they just wanted to know that everybody was doing things, and they measured success by watching you and making sure you clock in, clock out. This is how it's been set up this whole time. When you look at corporate America now, and from what I've seen is when you have people who are, coming into the environment, and they start to see hierarchy, they start to see things like, oh, I work in this, cubicle, but my boss works in that bigger cubicle. oh, he must be more important. You know, so I'm going to work really hard. And then when I work really hard and I have that cubicle, I have this cubicle now. You guys I have this cubicle. And then if I work harder, I get the corner office. I have this corporate office now. When you create a workplace environment that physically gives you an idea or a perception of I'm better than, anytime an environment, a physical environment does that, it does something to your psyche. And big bosses want to leverage on that. They want to keep that. They want to hold on to this because this is what I've worked so hard on, so hard for. And the people who are under that or beneath that, it's either I work hard, but I'm not recognized, either because I'm a threat to, or I, different from. So I even find another job somewhere else, or I become one of them. And this culture goes up this way. And then by the time you get to the leadership, that's what I've been seeing in my studies, is that's why corporate leadership has turned into that today. And again, these are just from the studies that I've so far read. I don't mean to make this a full sweeping statement. It's just what I'm learning now and understanding from the studies that I'm learning from school, from organizational psychology. And that's—
So how would you define in one sentence this imposter syndrome, with all ages, by the way, not just with the young folks, but the older staff as well? How
Help me understand what you mean by imposter syndrome.
Well, that's just it. When I talk to my clients and I ask them, and it's basically they feel that they shouldn't have the position that they're in. They feel that at some point, the administration or supervisor is going to find out. And they don't feel good enough in comparison to their peers. And it's such a big issue today. And over time, like you were mentioning, the cumulative effects on mental health. Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
So I want to let people know also, because you've been on Good Day Austin, on Fox 7, NBC News, making remote work for employers and employees. You've been on radio and podcasts out of Chicago, the WJOL Morning Show, Diane Jones Morning Show in St. Louis, Clicks and Bricks podcast, Heartbeat of Kitsap podcast. Where was that out of?
Seattle.
Out of Seattle. Yes. Shut Up and Grind podcast with our mutual friend. Yes, we both know Robert Foster. How companies can respond to the rising tide of the Great Resignation you were featured in that article. I love this one, 8 steps to welcome employees back to the office, a featured workplace article. Or you were featured in this workplace article by Jennifer Elsevier, if I pronounced that correctly. And we're going to get back to other articles. How to reimagine onboarding for remote and hybrid workers. You were featured in that article written by Scott Clark. Okay. So,
wow. Well,
and you go on and there's more.
I'm surprised.
There's more. But I want to talk a little bit about you. So you are so passionate and so vibrant. And you're pursuing you said your master's, your graduate work in industrial organizational psychology. Tell us a little, define that, because a lot of people are not aware of this very big, actually, organizational industrial psychology has been around over 20 years. And it definitely is so important within the workplace. Tell us a little bit about that specialization within the discipline of psychology.
Wow, that's a tall feat. It's funny because I found it because I needed a scientific approach. My approach to understanding workplace and developing a workplace experience is from the artistic approach and the creative approach. I was an actor, I was an interior designer, it was from that side. I needed to understand a scientific approach of developing a workplace and understanding behavior and really what is that effect from a scientific approach. So I looked it up, and I didn't know about it before. I did find, wow, my understanding and why I was immediately gravitated towards industrial organizational psychology is that's exactly what it does. It understands the psychology within the work environment. What is leadership? What is the interaction between people? What is how does social psychology work within the confines or within the workplace? It's all of that. And I think,
and I've got to tell you, as a clinical psychologist looking at you, to me, you incredibly define and represent the field of IO, industrial organizational psychology. And when we started talking at the top of the show, I mean, you started mentioning the importance of diversity and the importance of accommodations for all individuals, whether it be lighting, whether it be ergonomic seating, or whether it be just in positioning, acoustic. And I commend you for that.
Well, thank you.
Especially in today's world.
Yes.
And in the United States. So I wanna take a quick step back to mental health in the workplace in America today. Tell us.
Okay. Let me tie this into what you were asking earlier about the imposter syndrome, and you know what that was, and what I'm learning now in classes now is the learned
helplessness.
Thank you. That's what it is, learned helplessness. And that's what I'm seeing. And that's why I'm really I have now been certified to do DEIB, or diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging.
Oh, wonderful. Say that again, diversity. Say that again.
Yes, because it's something that's so important in my work, but to know that there's certifications and learning things that I've been really involved in that. I lead now in IFMA is the International Facility Management Association. We're worldwide. And under IFMA is which is Workplace Enterprises, which is the workplace component of this Facility Management Association. I lead what's called We Belong within we, and that is all about DE&I or DEIB in the work.
And tell us that acronym, diversity, inclusion.
Diversity. So diversity, there's a nice way that somebody had mentioned about talking about the difference of this. It's like if you're going to a party, diversity is asking someone that is not, somebody else to come to the party. Inclusivity is inviting them to dance. Equity is asking them or inviting them to give their own playlist for the dance floor.
I love it.
And all of that creates an environment of belonging.
And it's very big in the workplace now.
And it should be. I think it always has been. And back to this whole concept of learned helplessness. And you're talking about maybe what you mean about imposter syndrome and the mental health. And when you are traditionally beaten down and you're used to getting paid less, you're used to being treated a certain way, you're used to being called, oh, sweetie, or you're used to these microaggressions that are told you, oh, you don't look disabled. Oh, but you have a mental disability, for example. You get used to that, you start to believe it. And when you start to believe it, you start to think, well, maybe I'm not worth it then. And the thing I think about the pandemic, one of again, it's a silver lining. That's all it is, really, a silver lining to the pandemic is it forced us all to stop, take pause, get reconnected with what is valuable to us. What is valuable to us? What are really our priorities? Now, all of a sudden, we're afraid of a threat of this disease. Wait, I've got to protect my family. I've got to protect my parents. My parents are vulnerable. My children are vulnerable. And then when you start to realize the value that you bring to the world, wait a minute, I'm more valuable than what I've been treated. Wait a minute, then I'm going to go back to school. When you look at the Great Resignation and you look at the people who have the reasons why they left and what they're doing now, they went on to find another job, or they went on to start their own businesses. They went on to go back to school. They started to realize, wait, the value that I bring is greater than what I've been treated. And here we go, in the 70% of Americans who hated their jobs prior to the pandemic, It is not a coincidence. No wonder it's 4.5 million people every month since April quitting their jobs. In fact, it's not a coincidence that early last year, when companies started to announce everybody's coming back into the office, that was early last year. Very shortly after that, the Great Resignation began.
So what is the timeline for the Great Resignation?
We started at, when I talk about it, I start from April. So when you look at at it in the government, there's a government initiated statistics that show how many people, it's called quits rate, how many people have been quitting from their jobs. And that is normally around 2 million every month, maybe 1 million every month. People quit and they find another job, and it's tied to unemployment and what that looks like. That's why those statistics are important. April of 2021 was the first time in American history that it reached the 4 million mark. 4 million people quit their jobs. And then every month since April, it was at 4 million, 4.2, maybe 1 month it dipped down to 3.9. It was 4 million. In November, which is the last one that I had, November of last year, it was 4.5 million quits.
My goodness.
Yes.
What other time in the history of the US had we experienced something like this?
From as far as I know, from everything that I've read, never.
Okay. So
that's why it's kind of like, well, duh, because 70% of Americans were unhappy. Now they're leaving. So, when you talk about mental health and these issues and being marginalized or being learned helplessness, and there, you're traditionally feeling less than. Pandemic has allowed us to be empowered and understand, wait a minute, I'm more than this. And so we're doing our own thing. We're finding our own way and our own path. And there's a couple things that I wanted to mention with this, and I'll focus on this one. When we talk about the Great Resignation, when you hear right now, you hear about working from home, you hear about, working remotely, everybody, we're even talking about that, right? When you talk about the Great Resignation, the 4.5 million people, the 4 million every month, when you look at the statistics of the workforces behind, or the industries behind the people who are quitting their jobs, a vast majority, 90% of them, come from an industry called the deskless workforce industry. So the deskless workforce, these are the top ones: hospitality, the food industry, so restaurants and the healthcare, retail, arts and entertainment, education. These are all industries that never even had the option and still don't have the option of working from home. So
and they're the infrastructure of our country, right?
And if you think about it, that's why there's the supply chain issues, the war for talent. Nobody's wanting to come back to work in restaurants. Nobody's wanting to come back to work. People are leaving healthcare. When you look, these are the people who are quitting. They're quitting from these industries. And when you look at traditionally how these industries have been structured, the focus has always been on the customer and not on the employee themselves. Think about when you go to a restaurant, when you go to a hotel, when you go, when you walk into a hotel, when even your dentist, or when you walk into a hospital, the focus is on the experience of the customer and not on the experience of the employee. So, and I don't mean to be political here. I'm just going to use this as an example, okay? So, without meaning to be political. In the restaurant industry, when these mask mandates and vaccine mandates started to come in place, if you think about the restaurant people, the waiters, the people in the kitchen, they are there day in, day out, facing all these customers.
Frontliners
who are in threat. They're exactly, and their families, they could bring it back to their families. So whether or not the rigidity of a company in its push for making sure that customers have to be vaccinated or they have to wear masks, the rigidity that a restaurant, say for example, has with that is an expression to the employees of how much they're valued.
What a profound point.
It's not about
Leni, so true.
If I'm an employee, if I'm a restaurant person, if I'm a hotel person, and the company is not making sure that I have a safe environment, why would I come?
Well, and the pay hasn't always been that, great either.
Exactly. And let's take away the pandemic part. Let's look at their break rooms. I've seen the break rooms in one of the chapters of my book is dedicated to the deskless workforce, because there is such little focus on employees within this industry, even though the deskless workforce forms 80% of the global workforce. So when you look at their break rooms, a lot of them, the employees have to if they need to go to the bathroom, they have to wait in line with their customers and use the same.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't aware of that. And I want to get to your books too. So somebody as phenomenal as you doesn't just appear on the scene. I am so interested in knowing about little Leni.
Oh.
So what were you like growing up?
That's a good question. Maybe one from my mother. I was always, so I am the middle child, and I was always the middle child. So I have an older brother and a younger sister, and I was always the artist. So I'm the introvert. So the two of them are extroverts.
You're the introvert?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the two of them, they were out playing. If we were going to go to a party or something, they would be out playing. They would be out, and I would be in my own little world, maybe playing with my own things or writing. Or I was always that. I was, the artist. I was also always the one who marched the beat of a different drummer. So where, they follow. So my brother, for example, he's a well-established guru in marketing. He's a marketing director now. That was his path. He has his MBA, and he's doing really well in that. And so his schooling went in that area. I'm completely opposite. As you can tell, my background is I was here, and then I moved there, and then I moved here, and then I moved there, following a line. But, I kind of
well, yeah, but you're very integrated as a person.
Yeah. Well,
and your younger sister,
and my younger sister, so she is a clinical my mom is a clinical social worker. She teaches kids with autism. So she has her ABA, she has her master's degree, and she teaches kids with autism. And she works now helping students or helping kids in classrooms to adapt with autism, to adapt into this world. And she's phenomenal at that job. And again, it's she went to school for it, she studied it, it's been her passion for all this time.
What was your passion as a child?
I wanted to be an actor.
Okay. and you became it. Yeah. So your first love?
I was in kindergarten. I remember my first love. Funny enough, I remember just being on the jungle gym, and I was on the top of the jungle gym, and his name was Toby.
Toby, you remember that? Okay.
Because I was shouting at him, Toby, save me from the cat, save me from the, and he would go fighting everybody. That was, don't ask. I don't know what that means.
It's incredible today, as you sound like you were then. Your biggest regret in life, Leni, if you have one?
I just wish I have more time. I don't regret anything because it's led me to where I am, but I can't leave this world knowing that other humans are treating other humans this badly. I cannot live this. I cannot live in, I refuse to live in a world where that is normal. I refuse. And that is why I'm on TV. I'm writing books. I'm writing articles. I'm trying to get out there because I want to create change. I need to create change. And if there's one regret in life, it's that I only have one lifetime to do this. It's going to take forever to start this and to start this change. But I'm doing the best that I can to get there. But that's it. It's that I just wish I had more than one lifetime.
The hardest thing about being you?
When you are different, you are constantly faced with being an other. And that's really hard. You're always swimming upstream. I always have been. I mean, when I was living in the Philippines, being different, I look different. I'm taller than Filipinas. I look different. I had an American mom. I'm very liberal. I stood out. I was discriminated against. I was, put down multiple times. And you're an artist in the Philippines, which isn't also, appreciated. And That happened. And when you're pushing for something that you really believe in, I mean, again, here I am in America, and I'm trying to wave this flag of workplace experience, and it's an uphill battle.
Why do you think it's an uphill battle?
Because I'm fighting against an industry that has been relying on a structure for hundreds of years. So how we were talking about the hierarchy of things, and that was a creation of the workplace. Now that the workplace is deconstructed, now, Jody, we have an opportunity to create change, because now it doesn't matter if you were once, once leaders were the heads in a conference room, and they sat at the big giant chair at the head of the table. Now we all have the same Zoom sized rectangle, and we're all equal. Okay, and that's uncomfortable for some people, but it is what it is, right? Now you're hiring diversity, you're hiring diverse people. Now you in order to make sure that people are sustainably productive, you have to give them what they need according to what they need, not what you think they need. Policies are going to change. The way you manage people is going to change, because you can't see them anymore. They're not clocking in, clocking out. The biggest question I get from leaders and in podcasts and in conversations is, how am I going to manage my people if I can't see them? Well, why should you? Why should you see them? The shift is from managing people to managing work.
And do you think the socialization aspect will still be maintained at a certain level? Because we know psychologically that's important.
Yes.
Do you think that could still be maintained?
Yes, I think that the biggest change that is happening now, when we talk about work and the future of work, the biggest change is the shift of a company mindset from being employees and workers as numbers to now seeing them as whole people. Because the pandemic allowed us to see that. We were talking about, can you hear my dogs? Or my cat's going to jump up. We're whole people now. Kids are going to be running around. We already know that we're starting to establish, there's a human side to you.
And I love that side when I interact with people.
Right.
So I have to ask you, one word to describe yourself, one word to describe Leni. What would that be?
I'll say positive.
Positive.
I was going to say passionate, because I am that too.
Oh my gosh, you are ever passionate.
I know, but
I'm positive.
I know. I want to focus on the positive, because you can be passionate about things that are not positive.
Okay.
I'm optimistic.
Integrated brain, Leni. I'm telling you, you got a brain and it creates a lot of angst, I'm sure, because you're so intellectual as well as creative. You're gifted.
Oh, thank you.
Other articles. Only you know how to drive your success and wellness at work. Workers should expect the same company benefits if they choose to work from home. Let's talk about why. And re-entering the workplace, 5 things every workplace should have, and the one thing every employee should ask for. Talk to us about your books.
Okay, so the book that I published, one book, it's called The Workplace Experience. It's Workplace Experience.
Hold that up. Now, those of you on Skype and the other platforms, you're going to have to watch the YouTube. Awesome. Okay, Workplace Experience.
Workplace Experience, it's create a place where people thrive, business grows, and cultures live.
Excellent. And I think didn't I read you have another one in the works though?
I do have another one in the works. I'm kind of, I was developing, so I created this concept called the workplace of you. And the workplace of you is really about you, and it's talking to you, because like I said, the shift is now on people, whereas traditionally it was about management and about how we're going to manage people, and it wasn't really people. They're just numbers in a sea of desks. Now you're whole people. So now in this world of great resignation, in this world of war for talent, in this world of you can work from anywhere and you can
war for talent.
Wow. It's for you. And so you are empowered now. You are empowered. And so I want to encourage that. It's don't give in. Stay strong in who you are. And Workplace of You is, even though it's about people, it's helping companies and company leaders understand that the workplace is shifting to becoming about people and whole people. and what does that look like, and how can that look like, and the focus on the work and how people work, not where they work, when they work, you know, or what time they work.
Okay. So where can people, tell us again the title of your first book and where they can find it?
It's called Workplace Experience. And
okay.
You can find that on Amazon.
Okay. And where can people contact you?
Yeah. Well, okay, great. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm findable on LinkedIn, Leni Rivera, or you can find me on my website. I encourage you to look through my website. You'll see everything that you talked about, my my videos, my guest appearances, my
and I looked on LinkedIn too, and of course, good old Google. So
right. Yeah, Google will have that too. And my website is www.workplaceexperience.net. It's experience spelled with an X. So
say that again. Say that again.
www.workplaceexperience.net. Experience is spelled with an X, so it's one word, workplaceexperience.net.
Leni, if you had one message to leave for our audience, what would that be?
Be kind.
Be kind.
You see angry people around, and know that you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what the pandemic has had on them, the effect the pandemic has had on them. People have had loss, great loss of who they are, their identity, people that they've loved, loved ones. They've lost money. They've lost, whole companies, who they are. You don't know what people are and why they're having a bad day or why they're being cross. Or be kind. If there's one thing, gosh, guys, gosh, America, enough of this treating people inhumanely. Be kind.
Leni Rivera, you're incredible. We are so lucky to have you in our country and within the discipline of industrial organizational psychology. I can't thank you enough. It's beyond a privilege to have had you on Inside America's Minds.
Thank you, Jody. It's a privilege to have been here, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you back and what you're doing for America. So thank you.
To be continued.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You take good care.
You too.